Hello and welcome to this Techarati interview series ahead of Tech Show London on the 8th and 9th of March at Excel London. I'm Stuart Crowley, Closer Still Media's Global Content Manager and Editor of Techarati, and it's my pleasure to have Dr. Christyl Johnson with me today. She's the Deputy Director for Technology and Research Investments at NASA. Christyl will lead a keynote at Tech Show London main stage on harnessing technology to bring sustainable human presence to Mars. But today we're going to talk about 3 significant years in Christyl's life that have shaped her life and career. So welcome, Christyl.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great to have you, and I'm loving the background. So, Christyl, what is the first significant year of your life that's really shaped who you are, your career, and also how it's led up to you being at Tech Show London in March?
Yeah, so my current role is to shape the missions of the future in astrophysics, earth science, heliophysics, and planetary science, and then put together a portfolio of investments so that we could actually, of technology, so that we can actually enable those amazing missions of the future. And for me, I think back through the years, and one of the most, I would say one of the most influential years for me was in the relatively early stage of my career when I was designing and building laser systems for remote sensing of the atmosphere. And so back in the day when I first came to NASA, I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. It's like, oh my God, I'm working at NASA. This is the coolest place on the planet to be working. And I don't know if you're familiar with the imposter syndrome, but I definitely had a ton of it, because you walk in and NASA is enamored with acronyms. And so everything was an acronym. I could barely understand what they were talking about most of the time. But in building the lasers in the laboratory, I knew exactly what I was doing. And so I got to a point where I'd walk into a room in meetings, and I would immediately sit along the wall and not sit at the table, because I kind of felt like, I'll let the rest of the folks sit at the table. I'll sit back here and just observe, and I'll speak when I need to speak. And so I got to the point where I would ask a question, because most of the time it was all males in the room. There were maybe 1 or 2 other females in the whole organization, and it was just me in most of these meetings. And so I'd ask a question of, one of the people in the room. And I noticed after a while that the man who was answering the questions wouldn't even look at me when he was answering my question. He would look at the other men in the room. And so it got to a point where I felt like I was invisible. And it was fueled by the fact that I felt an imposter anyway. I don't know as much as some of these people do, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of these days, I had one situation that really opened my eyes. And so I was selected to be the associate or the assistant branch head of our electro-optics and controls organization. And that had huge responsibilities. And so I was in the laboratory with my technician, or in his office, and he came in and he was like, oh, I just had to peel whatever her name is off the ceiling. She was really upset that you got selected for this position. She said, the only reason you got this job is because you're Black. And I was like, And I was like, that's interesting. And most of the time when people say something like that, it's like water off a duck's back. I just let it go. But for some reason, this particular time, I just couldn't let it go, because in my mind, I was thinking, so I got this job not because I established the first piezoelectric coefficient laboratory in the United States and have people coming from around the globe to measure their crystals in my lab. It's not because I made the first chromium lysaf laser to achieve 33 millijoules and was recognized on an international conference because of the work that I'm doing. It's not because, and I just kept going through all these major achievements that I had done. And I was like, wait a minute, I deserve to be here. Not only do I deserve to be here, but I deserve to have my voice heard. So never again will I walk into a conference room and sit along the wall. I will take my rightful place at the table and have my voice heard. That's when I found my voice. That is when I realized the uniqueness that I bring to the table is of significant value. And I had a situation afterwards where it was demonstrated to all of the men in the room. And that was one time when I was the lead for the diode seeding, the locking system for a laser program. And the diode seating system was not working. It was not able to lock onto the line it was supposed to lock onto. And so I put together a Tiger team for us to focus on finding out the problem, because we were in the critical path. We were in the way of being able to launch on time. And so for me, failure is not an option ever. And so we put this team together, and we had the chief engineer of the whole organization who would come in, and he would want to redirect my team to have them do what he thought was best to do. But when you have a problem, you have to meticulously make the changes so that when you find the solution, you know this was what caused the problem, and you know that you fixed it so it won't happen again. And so when I asked him not to do that, he was like, I'm the chief engineer, I can do whatever I want. So I got the whole management structure together, the management team, a couple levels above me, to come to a meeting with this chief engineer. And they were going to talk to him and say, look, this is what we need to do for this. Long story short, we get in the meeting, and he tells them, you can't tell me what to do. I'm the chief engineer. I'll do whatever I want to do. Of course, then all these males, and there are no other females in the room, they start getting enraged, and they were very angry, going back and forth with each other. And I said, gentlemen, I said, as long as we know the rules of the game, we can play it. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I said, if he insists on coming into the lab, redirecting our engineers and telling them to make changes and not going to listen to them, I said, all we have to do is just direct the engineers. Whenever he comes in, you must ignore him. You're being directed to ignore the chief engineer of our organization. And so they were like, okay, fine. And so he walks into the lab the next time, they ignore him, he walks out. He tried it one more time, he walks out. And so they got a chance to see that, and I learned also, that is when I realized that you really cannot allow emotions to rule you. Because the moment you allow emotions to control and to dominate the conversation, you lose the ability to think rationally. And for me, ever since then, and something I've done a lot in my life, whenever really challenging situations come up, that's when I focus. That's when I go in and I really disconnect from the emotion, and I start looking at different vantage points so that I can figure out how to look at this problem from a totally different angle. And that's how I've been able to be innovative my whole career.
What would you say to younger people who are looking to become leaders themselves, but they have experienced imposter syndrome like you?
Oh, yeah.
How would you encourage them or inspire them, or what would you say to them to become a better leader, or be like yourself?
Yeah, I would say the first and most significant challenge for them is for them to get a chance to see who they are and to see the value that they bring to the table. They have to know themselves. They have to understand that they wouldn't be where they are if someone didn't think that they were good enough to be there. And so now they have to believe that they are good enough to be there and realize that no one can tell you what's possible for you and what's not possible for you. No one can realize your dreams for you but you, and also no one can get in the way of you achieving your dreams and objectives except for you. And so you must be the one. If it's to be, it's up to me. That's what my father has always told me. That's an important thing for everyone to remember. People are going to treat you the way that you project for them to treat you.
You mentioned achieving your dreams. Do you feel like you're living your dream now in NASA? Is this something that you aspired to do?
Absolutely. I am living the dream every single day and loving every minute of it. And it's just a new day every single day. I get to interact with people around the globe all the time. I am focused on doing the impossible every single day. And so give me a problem, tell me that something's impossible. And that's when I'm like, yes, you've just given me a challenge, because I'm here to prove to you that you're wrong.
Including what you're going to be talking about at Tech Show London, which is presence on Mars. Is that a dream of yours? Is that an ambition of yours? And how so? Why is that a dream of yours?
I would say that it is not a dream of mine to go to Mars. I have no desire to leave this planet. I do have the desire, though, to pave the way for those brave individuals that want to do it. I have a dream that we as engineers are going to make it completely safe for them to go and to be able to return. I was a part of NASA during the Columbia accident. And when you know that there is a problem that has occurred because of engineering decisions and the Challenger accident, all of these are engineering types of accidents. The entire team, the entire NASA family, including our contractor, members of the family, we all took that very, very personally. And so, we had to walk by the board that has all of the notes from the family members to the astronauts. You see their kids and the notes that their kids wrote to them before they were launching. We had to look at those notes and realize these people are the ones that are affected by decisions that we make as engineers. And so for me, it is my dream and objective to make this journey for them one that is as comfortable as possible, as safe as possible, and as enjoyable as possible. And then also for us to be able to stream it back to the rest of the world so all of us can experience it right along with them.
You mentioned facing adversity for your skin color.
Yes.
Do you think this has improved, and also possibly your gender as well?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Technology industry. Do you think that this has improved, and why do you feel that diversity and diversity for people of color and women as well, why do you feel that it's important for your line of work to have that diversity? So has it improved, and why is it important that it's improving?
Yes, so it definitely is improving. And I don't know if anyone has seen that movie, Hidden Figures, but for that, yeah, you have seen it. That's great. But if you remember in that movie, for us, to be able to have humans, going to the moon, that whole Apollo program, and you remember the fact that they had these African-American women who were the computers, who did the analysis to make them feel comfortable enough that they would actually have the right trajectories and all. For NASA, it was really about finding the brightest minds to come to the table to solve the problems. And it didn't matter what you looked like. So for us, we've created that environment within NASA that in order to innovate, you must bring diverse minds to the table. If you have everybody that looks the same and people who have the same life experiences and they hang out at the same places, eat the same food, vacation to the same spaces, you will find that you get groupthink. And so when you have a problem, when you have a really difficult problem like they had, those people come up with the similar solutions to that same challenging problem. And they don't come up with a solution. They come up with something that's an evolutionary change or a slight adjustment. But if you want to make revolutionary changes and you want to come up with a whole new approach to come up with a creative solution for something, you've got to bring people who have totally different life experiences and totally different, ways of thinking to the table. So they look at your problem and they say, why are you looking at it that way? Why don't you just do X? And you're like, oh my God, we never even thought of that. And so any company that is looking at staying at the cutting edge of whatever it is that they deliver or whatever it is they do, you really need to make sure that you have the most innovative team brought together. So people who can look at things from different vantage points and offer you solution space, trade space that is broad, not a very narrow trade space for you to make your decisions on. What
would you say is your second significant year that you've chosen?
I think my second significant year, I would say, is when I was sitting with the NASA administrator. He came into my office and I was thinking, he was the one that said, Christyl, you really need to consider going back to get your PhD. And I was like, I am tired of school. I've had my master's degree in electrical engineering, and I'm not interested in going to school anymore. But he was like, Christyl, a PhD actually it opens doors that you don't even know exist. And you certainly don't have the keys to those doors because, of course, you don't know that they exist. And so I said, I'll think about it. And, we kind of went back and forth. But then I started thinking, and once I started down that path, I said, okay, so looking at my PhD thesis, a question that I have for you is, what keeps you awake at night? As the leader of NASA, all of NASA, what keeps you awake at night? And he said, one of the things that keeps me awake is, when are we going to make a wholesale investment in green technologies. And so I was like, and I started asking myself, well, why aren't we making a wholesale investment? And it's like every single time we get ready to think about doing it, we get right up to the edge of the cliff and then we back away because we can't ever close the business case for investing and, making that leap off the cliff. So I started asking questions. Well, what assumptions are going into the business cases that we've been considering over the years? And I found out that we really were not looking at full life cycle costs for green fuel. And this is fuel propellants for our launch vehicles and the spacecraft that we use. And so as I started looking at that, I uncovered a green fuel that was started in Russia, but the Swedes had really taken over and started developing it. And so I said, okay, I really want to look at going green, look at all the costs associated with it. So I went over to Sweden. They opened up the books to me at the place that manufactures this green propellant. I walked through the plant, understanding what kind of costs were involved with manufacturing it, storing it, transporting it, the launch operations and everything, and came up with all of the criteria that you have to use in order to make a decision about whether you go green or not. And we got to a place where we were able to launch a mission at NASA using green propellants. The very first time we were able to launch a mission in the United States just recently to demonstrate that capability. But leading up to it, I went to Sweden again. We had a launch there in Sweden, and we had hydrazine, which is the fuel that we use constantly today, and we had the green propellant. It was ammonium dinitramide, the propellant we were using. And in that particular mission, we had a tank with one and a tank with the other. We compared them back and forth, and the performance of the green one was just as good or better than the hydrazine, which is the current state of the art for the industry. And so bringing that to all of our nations, even things like the airbags, when they deploy, they use a little bit of hydrazine, all of these toxic things. And the reason hydrazine is not good for those kind of things is in order to store hydrazine, you put it in a tank and you have to purge it with a gas in order to keep oxygen from getting to the fuel. If a little bit of oxygen gets in there, it will explode. And so it's very dangerous. And if you breathe in any of this hydrazine, it can actually kill you. It will burn everything all the way down. And so people have to operate it using what we call escape suits, which is a whole outfit that has its own ventilation and everything. And so when you think about all of the way you have to specially transport it and all of that, we did a test for that one launch. And just in the operations phase, we saved $500,000 just with the green versus that, because you have to shut down operations when you load it. There's so many other aspects of it. But now getting to a place where we can, and I'll just say also for the Columbia accident, it was very difficult for us when it came apart over the United States and in Texas, where all of the debris, particles were. We had a difficult time getting out there quickly because there was still hydrazine in some of the components that came down. And thank God it didn't come down over a very populated area, over houses and things like that, because there were very toxic fuels in that. And it's like, why are we still using these things when they're so incredibly dangerous? And now, because of the work that I've done and the missions that we've demonstrated, we can actually consider the full switch to green propellants. That was major for me. Companies think about how much do I need to invest and what will the return on that investment be? And so if they have to make a switch to their infrastructure, change everything out to be able to manufacture a totally different line of fuel, and they had already had everything set up, for their current manufacturing, and it's already doing really well. They have a great business model and everything's, it's profitable, very profitable. Then you have to really convince them that it makes financial sense for them to make the change. One of the reasons, though, that they were not comfortable making that change was because when they were looking at the return on the investment, they were only considering the current cost of transitioning their facilities. They weren't thinking about the fact that you have to go all the way back to manufacturing that, transporting that, end-of-life disposal of the fuels and everything else, because we have cleanup with the hydrazine. Way back in the day, they used to, in order to dispose of it at the end of life, they used to dump it down into the ground. Well, it got into the water tables. So NASA was responsible for going in California, going out there and cleaning up the water, the basins, and making sure that they had clean drinking water. And so it's very expensive when you have disposal and all of those other elements that you have to consider. So anyone that's really in the business of providing a fuel or providing a specific service, they really need to look at total life cycle cost when they're trying to make that decision to switch over. And so I came up with the whole criteria from cradle to grave that we really need to look at in order to make those kinds of business decisions.
Is that what you would advise? We'll have a lot of people from lots of different industries coming to Tech Show London that are interested in sustainability, data center professionals, cloud professionals, big data professionals. What would you say to them that are looking, because sustainability is a really key topic at Tech Show London, but also because of the appetite for it? What would you say to them to achieve that?
Yeah, I would say that there's so much motivation for us to go that way. And there are so many different components that people are not even considering at this point in time. And so we are developing different forum for us to really be able to dive into the cost benefits and some of the other benefits, some of the application benefits. When you look at things from a totally different vantage point and you design something for, let's just say, big data, using big data, you bring different communities together and the benefits are tenfold or 100-fold. If you're just looking at it in your myopic field, then the investment is all yours. But when you're leveraging and you're co-creating with people in different industries that most people aren't even thinking about, then you can magnify that significantly. And so it really is a matter of thinking about it more broadly than just your narrow, field.
Finally, what would you say is your last significant year that has really shaped your career and your life?
Yeah, I would say that it was when we had an election in the United States, and George Bush was our president at the time. And the election had President Obama, who was running for office. And so right before I'll say during the election, I talked to the NASA administrator and deputy administrator and said, I've never been close to a transition. I would love to see what one looks like up close and personal. And so the deputy administrator called over to the White House, the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and asked them if they needed people to come over during the transition to help with that. And so they said, well, we don't have any, openings right now, but send her over and we'll just interview her just in case. So I went over to the White House. I did the interview. It went really, really well. And then the next day, believe it or not, they called back to the deputy administrator and said, you'll not believe this, but the person who was the executive director of the National Science and Technology Council, which is the council that coordinates all science and technology policy across the entire federal enterprise in the United States, that person had to go back to their agency because they were promoted. So now we have a need, and she's the perfect candidate to take over this responsibility. So they hired me to come over. Well, it was a detail assignment from NASA to go over to the White House when George Bush was still in office. I got a chance to watch him wind down, and then the election happened and Obama got elected. So I got to watch this whole new team come in. And Obama's team, so I was there for that year to transition. And then Obama's team asked me to stay for another year to transition that council to give it more teeth. So aligning priorities along with budget was something that I was really keen on doing. But what was really critical to me during that time was watching how President Obama made decisions. And so when I realized whenever a president or the lead of any country, whenever they have to make a tough decision, no matter what decision they make, they're going to make millions of people angry. It's just the way that it is. If you have, in the United States, we have Democrats and Republicans. And so if a Democratic president makes a decision, there are going to be millions of people who don't like that decision. Even if he says, we're deciding the sky is blue, you will have people who will be very angry and say, it's not really blue. It only looks blue because of what's happening in the atmosphere. There will be people who will argue. So the way that he made his decisions, he would say, okay, I need for you all to give me all of the facts, not opinions. Give me the facts so that I can determine for myself what I believe the best choice is for our nation. And then once I say, this is the plan I think we need to, the approach we need to take, I need for you, my team, to go and work to mitigate the impact for that. So work with our opponents and find out, what do we need to do to bring them on board, and so forth and so on. Once you get to the place where he knows the pros, he weighs the pros and cons on it, he actually moves out on it, understanding you're going to make some people angry, but deep in his core, he believed and he knew that he was doing what was best for our nation in his eyes. And so for me, that really helped me to see that no matter, how you make decisions, it comes back to going inside and looking inside yourself and feeling confident that you have the facts, not opinions, and you're making the decision that you feel is the best decision. And so that was a real eye-opener for me, to be at the top of the government, in the United States, and understand the intricate workings of it and be a part of all of that. It was just an amazing experience.
Going back to your first year with imposter syndrome, did you experience...
Yes. Did I experience imposter syndrome when I got to the White House?
Yes.
Believe it or not, I did not. I did not, because I really mastered that when I got, when I had that experience there, I really mastered it. And then what I learned is it goes from some people being imposter syndrome to being fear. And that fear I've truly mastered. I've realized that some of the most successful people in the world are people who understand and who they've mastered their understanding and their relationship with fear. And by fear, I don't mean the clear and present danger fear. I mean false evidence appearing real. And that kind of fear is intended to paralyze you and to keep you from realizing your dreams and going after your goals. But those people that really understand the relationship and they've mastered that relationship, those are the ones that can soar. So for me, whenever I have all of these fears that come into my head, they go from, in my head to on paper. I write them down. Okay, if this happens, then I will do this. If this happens, then I will do this. So once you get it out of your head and onto paper, it's not such a big, horrible monster. And you actually have a plan of attack in case those things really do happen. And most of the time they never do. So I've really learned how to navigate in very challenging, very unique, very different circumstances around the world, because I've mastered that. And so the imposter syndrome doesn't exist for me anymore.
There's going to be thousands of people at Tech Show London. I'm sure that's not going to intimidate you now with that conquering of imposter syndrome. So my question to you is, are you excited to come to Tech Show London? And
I am so excited.
And what are you looking forward to imparting and sharing with these many thousands of people that are going to be coming to the show? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing with them the vision that we have for the next generations to be able to explore. I'd like to just excite them about the exploration and give them a little glimpse into what it's going to take, because this is not something that the United States alone is going to do. We are partnered with countries all over the world to be able to achieve this goal. And it is not just the government entities. We need for all of the companies and all of the universities to understand the roles that they can play. We need innovation. We need technology development. We need outside the box thinkers to help us come up with solutions. Because right now, in order for humans to survive and thrive on another planet, we have so many things that need to be invented, so many ideas that need to be brought to the table. And for the people at Tech Show London, I want to give them just a little glimpse of what is going to be needed so they can start thinking about what role they can play.